As always, Candy the Wonder Pup, seemingly fully recovered from her little hangnail. The nail that's higher up on the leg was the one that was bugging her, but it doesn't appear to be bothering her anymore. And she's hounding into my pocket trying to get my treat. So here we are. What day is it today? I don't even remember. 16th, 17th January, Thursday night, just after 10:45 p.m. And live and unscripted as always. Candy shaking a paw, laying down. Speak. A little better bark tonight. Someone's watching. I'm betting it's Danny F.E. I do have my coffee and no more profanity. Not using that mug tonight. This one is the Institute of Power Engineers, something I got at a golf tournament probably 15, 20 years ago. No, it's Hank Holiday who is here, and he's saying G-Man and Sea Dog. How is everyone tonight? How's life down in Texas, in the United States? Danny always writes that I have my Bible, my ticket. I got my Bible. I've got my coffee, and I don't need a ticket. Just a finger to operate my tablet that I'm running off of still, and I will be until next week. Laptop should be back sometime next week. I was just tonight wanting to run down kind of updates on what's happening in the news and my thoughts. Hank is looking forward to January 20th, this Monday, when Donald Trump retakes the Oval Office, when he takes when the inauguration takes place, I guess on Capitol Hill at the mall. They're expecting 250,000 people there. I heard a story today talking about locking down the capital region. What that means, I don't know. Obviously, people aren't going to be locked in their homes, COVID style, but security on steroids to ensure everything goes smoothly. We'll see what happens. Nothing would shock me at all anymore in today's world. Just running through the news that I'm paying attention to. The subject of my last video was this ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel that now appears maybe it will go, maybe it won't. The Israelis are claiming that Hamas is insisting on further demands with respect, I believe, to the number of Palestinian detainees to be released. And it looks like the whole thing could collapse, perhaps, but who's to say? And if it were to collapse, what does that mean when Donald Trump takes the oath of office on Monday? Because Trump had pledged that if the hostages were not released by the time he took the oath, by the time he reassumed his position in the White House, that I think the words he used were, all hell will break loose in the Middle East and it won't be good for anyone. And even as the original deal was laid out, there wasn't not going to be a complete and total release of the hostages it was slated to commence on Sunday. And it's apparently I forget how long the process is, but it's supposed to be a protracted process in 3 stages. And the first stage was going to start on Sunday with the release of just 3 hostages, 2 Americans, 1 Israeli. And then in the ensuing days and weeks, more. And the first stage called for 30-odd, 3 dozen or so hostages to be released. But as I said, the entire deal seems to be teetering. Depends on the news source that you pay attention to. A lot of news sites are still saying that it is, they're going ahead. The hostage deal, that it is going to continue. So we will see. what happens in there. I still think it's a bad deal for Israel. I would not be shocked to see it's like that the ceasefire deal they arranged with Hezbollah seems like a semi-ceasefire, like a ceasefire in name only. There were still hostilities taking place, but they were saying the deal is still holding. So I imagine it could unfold in that type of situation as well, where they say, well, the ceasefire deal is still holding. Meanwhile, nothing's being accomplished on any of the fronts. And I do think it's a bad deal for Israel because Hamas lives to fight another day. The rhetoric coming from Washington, from Israel, from Donald Trump is that Hamas will never again be able to reestablish control and leadership over the Gaza Strip. Well, how are they going to be dismantled? And I equally note and recognize the fact that for Hamas, their raison d'etre, their reason for being, is to eliminate the nation state of Israel from existence and to replace it with an Islamic state. And Israel is not going to allow itself to be eliminated. So it's the immovable force and the irresistible force and the immovable object. The irresistible force would be Hamas and Hezbollah and these groups that want Israel wiped off the map. And the immovable object is Israel. They're not going to allow themselves to be wiped off the map. So how that situation ever gets resolved, I think the best case scenario we could pray for is a period of peace, a year, 5 years, 10 years, but eventually it will blow up again. Switching over to my own native Canada, where we have a liberal leadership taking place. Justin Trudeau is still the Prime Minister of Canada. He is still the leader of the Liberal Party. They have started their process toward electing a new leader. March 9th, that vote will take place. And Mark Carney, who I have punted, as I think I did a video within the last week or so, introducing Canada's next Prime Minister, Mark Carney. I think it's a slam dunk that he will win. Everything is just going to be drama and theatrics around an inevitable conclusion, and that inevitable conclusion is that Mark Carney will win the leadership. I think they might just as well, avoid all the drama, avoid all the fake suspense, and just appoint him. But they got to play the game, make it appear democratic and everything, and he will win. And then sometime thereafter, between now and October, we will have an election. Once Mark Carney wins, and I'm assuming that's what's going to happen, that's my prediction, Carney is going to win. And then I think it's March 26th is when the Canadian House of Commons, our national legislature, reconvenes, and the new Liberal Party of Canada, led by Mark Carney, would then have to face scrutiny in the House of Commons, and there would be the potential for a vote of no confidence, which would send Canadians to the polls. But all a Mark Carney-led Liberal Party would have to do is get the support of either the NDP or the Bloc Québécois, and or if those two parties were to abstain from a vote on confidence, then Carney could remain in power. And one thing I've noticed is the Conservatives are very much trying to brand Carney. They're trying to define him. And the moniker they're sticking on him is Carbon Tax Carney. And it's a good marketing scheme to call him Carbon Tax Carney. But Carney himself is already signaling, as is Chrystia Freeland, who is expected to announce her official candidacy tomorrow. They are both saying that they will cancel the carbon tax and replace it with something else, that it is still vitally important to fight the big bad boogeyman of climate change, but that we'll do it in a different way. We're still going to put a price on carbon, but it may not be exactly in the form of a carbon tax. And stick whatever label on it you want. What Canada can do nothing in of itself, period. Even if carbon is the big bad boogeyman, even if the computer modeled simulations that predict catastrophe if we continue burning fossil fuels, even if those models, which are incredibly faulty and flawed, even if they are right, and we are heading towards a climactic disaster, which I do not believe. But even if they are accurate, if they are true, if they are a genuine predictive model, then Canada is a teeny tiny contributor to global carbon emissions. And on top of that, with our boreal forests and all the trees in this country, wildfires notwithstanding, there are more trees in the Northern Hemisphere now than there were 100 years ago or 100 plus years ago, because 100 plus years ago, people burned wood for heat. Now we have natural gas, we have electricity, we have geothermal, we have so many more options. But back 100 plus years ago, we were burning wood. And now there are more trees in the Northern Hemisphere than there were back then. And trees eat carbon. It's plant food. And the whole climate debate drives me nuts, because, again, even if climate change is the big bad boogeyman that climate watchers claim, I don't even like calling them scientists, because it's not a climate science is not a science. It's it's reading tea leaves. And all that's happened in Canada is that we've raised the cost of everything, and especially gas. Now it's over $1.50 Canadian per liter. In my area, we're up around $1.51, $1.52, and that increases the cost of everything. Food transportation, goods transportation, most products that arrive on Canadian shelves they get there by truck. They might be on the rails at some point. They might come in by ship and then be put onto rail, shipped by train, and then eventually they find their way onto a truck and then onto the stores, and it's gas, diesel, fuel. And when you raise the price of gas, you raise the price of everything. And it's depressing. And then the only other real thought I was looking at was Joe Biden, outgoing president of the US, gave kind of his farewell address to the American people, something of a tradition. And he, on top of touting the accomplishments of his administration, dubious though they may be, he gave a warning, a la outgoing President Dwight D. Eisenhower. When he left office, I think it was in 1960. I think Eisenhower was first elected in 52 and served 2 terms until 1960, when he was replaced by John F. Kennedy. And many will remember his outgoing address. It was the start of the movie JFK, Oliver Stone's seminal film depicting the assassination of John F. Kennedy and all the conspiracy theories surrounding it, as compared to the fictional crazy notion that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone from a book depository overlooking Dealey Square, was able, with a bolt action, I think it was an Italian rifle, was able to, target Kennedy and hit a moving target with a bolt action rifle. Insane. And at the beginning of that movie, JFK, they showed Dwight D. Eisenhower's outgoing address to the American people. And in that outgoing address, he warned of the rise of the industrial military complex and cited it as being a key, trying to think of the right words here, that it was a big obstacle or something that could threaten American democracy. And at the end of that movie, what they had was an actor playing Lyndon Johnson, the new president after Kennedy got assassinated, signing and saying, "I'll give you your war," or something to that effect. And the US went into the Vietnam conflict full bore and killed over 50,000 young men in that conflict. And anyway, so Biden gave his farewell address, and he warned of a rise of an oligarchy of these uber wealthy individuals who are threatening American democracy. And this is funny from a guy who gave so much prominence to guys like George Soros and others. And it strikes me, Biden used the terms I have used, that people of enormous wealth, power, and influence. That's how I describe the World Economic Forum. These are individuals who have enormous wealth, power, and influence to direct the affairs of predominantly the Western world. And whale oil beef has shown up, and we'll be here probably in about 8 minutes. We'll be caught up live because he's running at double speed to catch up. You haven't missed much. I have HM saying, hello, saw that warning from Eisenhower on the documentary about current dystopian technology called Final Days. If anyone wants to check it out, Final Days. I saw it. It was the opening clip to the movie JFK. I never saw that movie. I haven't seen that movie since I saw it in the theater. That's how long ago. And that, oh goodness, I don't know when that movie came out, whether it was the 80s or the 90s, but it certainly was one of those two. And that was almost, it serves something of an introduction to anyone who's new to this idea that there are powerful interests operating behind the scenes who are kind of directing things. But the interesting thing is, so this concept of an oligarchy has always been around, always going back into the 1800s, that there are powerful, wealthy, powerful interests behind the curtain directing things for their best interest. The only thing is now it's like there's a war going on behind the curtain, that there's a war going on between the George Soros types and the Elon Musk types. They're both incredible. These are players who are both incredibly wealthy, powerful, wealthy, and influential. They've got money, power, and influence, but they are at odds with each other. And it reminded me somewhat of a movie that came out probably sometime in and around the year 2000. Some may have heard of it. It was called Skulls. And what it did is it fixated on a senior society at Yale University called Skull and Bones. And Skull and Bones is what they call a senior society, not to be confused with a fraternity. In a fraternity, when you are a freshman, your first year at University College, you go and you pledge yourself to a fraternity. Everyone will remember the movie Animal House, National Lampoon's Animal House. And, you have a frat house and they have parties and it's a social thing, largely speaking. And a senior society, by contrast, you do not become a member of a senior society until you are in your senior year. And they refer to the day when individuals are invited to join senior societies as tap day. You get tapped. George W. Bush famously was also a member of Skull and Bones. Interestingly, so was John Kerry, the guy he ran against in, I'm trying to remember which election. It was that when he ran against Obama. I think that was the first time Obama ran in 2008. I think he went up against John Kerry, and then in 2012, Obama went up against Mitt Romney. But this idea, and here are two people John Kerry and George W. Bush, who are both members of the same senior society called Skull and Bones. And it was even brought up in an MSNBC interview. I think it was Chris Matthews who asked John Kerry, "It's my understanding that you are a member of Skull and Bones." And John Kerry confirmed it. And he said, as is President Bush. And yes. And he said, "No, this is a secret society. What is Skull and Bones?" And John Kerry said, "If I told you, it wouldn't be secret anymore." And in the movie Skulls, they have a young man who is working in the kitchen. He's at Harvard on a scholarship, but he's not from a wealthy background. But he's captain of the rowing team, which is big. And he gets tapped by Skull and Bones to join their fraternity or their senior society. And then his life becomes wonderful. He goes to his bank to take out 40, 50 bucks to go out drinking. And he looks at his account and it's got $60,000 in it or something. He's like, what? They reached into his account and they deposited all kinds of money for him. And he is introduced to a brand new world, the world behind the curtain, where the levers of power are controlled. And what he finds out is that there are basically two groups within this Skull and Bones society. And there's one group which are the legacy members who can trade. George W. Bush was a member of Skull and Bones. His dad, George H.W. Bush, was a member. His grandfather, Prescott Bush, was a member. He's a legacy. He's part of the Old Boys Club. So there were the Old Boys Club, and then there were newer guys who were brought in because of their talent, because of their intellect, because of their accomplishments, and they get co-opted into the group because Skull and Bones has its, they're scouting out talent to bring them in. And what they show you is kind of a battle behind the scenes. The group Skull and Bones has factions within it, two primary, the way it's depicted in the movie, and they are at times at odds with each other about how to accomplish things. And it strikes me we're in that kind of space right now where we have the young upstart Elon Musk, who I don't think actually qualifies as, he's not like one of the Kennedys. He's not like one of the Bush. He's not old money. He's new money. And who gets control? Who gets control? Well, you, me, and anyone watching this channel, pretty much guaranteed, is we just want to live our lives. We just want to live in freedom, peace, security. But there are games going on behind the scenes that we are not privy to that have direct impact on our lives. Fighting climate change, as if you can fight climate change when we don't even understand what drives climate. We can guess the degree to which fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels, we can guess that might have some impact on global climatic patterns, but we don't know. And I was talking, we were out earlier this evening, and there was a rather significant snowfall taking place. And I was telling my youngest about how in the 1970s, when I was around his age, that I saw a TV show, I think it was Nova, and it was being hosted by Leonard Nimoy, who was a science fiction actor from Star Trek, which my little guy knows nothing about. But how he was interviewing the top leading climate scientists of his day back 50 odd years ago. And I'm going to get to your comment, HM, and how the prediction back then was that the world was heading, the Northern Hemisphere was heading to an ice age. We were going to see an ice age. And they had pictures of Buffalo after a massive snowstorm. And I remember watching it at that young age and being somewhat alarmed. Oh my gosh, are we going to have an ice age? And now, of course, it's the same faulty science being used to predict a global climactic disaster if we don't stop burning fossil fuels. Let me read what HM wrote. Don't you think it's a lot of strange things have been going on this month since the Pope opened the 5 portals on Christmas Eve? I don't even know anything about that. I don't know anything about the Pope having opened 5 portals. Sounds like that old Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, George Carlin movie, and I forget the name of it, where Ben Affleck and Matt Damon played a couple of angels, one being Loki or Loki, and I forget the name of the other one. And they'd been kicked out of heaven, and now they were seeking a way back in, and there was a door being opened to them for them by the Pope. I'm going to have to read up on these 5 portals. If you want to send me a link to something or a video, but I prefer articles when it's stuff like that. An article from a reasonably reputable source. The Hank Holliday's writing, the fire smoke in California have 10 years of change in 4 days. The fire smoke in Cal have 10 years of change in 4 days. It's crazy what's going on in California. And I join with a lot of people think, this is a teardown. This is a teardown that we're witnessing, and it's a teardown that's been in slow motion. We all know about the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and Klaus Schwab talking about building back better. But before you can build back better, first you have to deconstruct, destroy. I'm trying to think of 3 Ds: demolish, deconstruct, and destroy. And then you can build back afterward. And we're in this tear down phase where they're tearing down the structures of the old world order to bring in, I'm not going to say the words because YouTube doesn't like them. HM agrees. And HM Heather's going to send that to me. It was even televised on YouTube. Send me the YouTube link. I don't mind watching another YouTube video on it. I've been consuming a lot of content by this kid, Wes Huff. And I say kid, he's 33 years of age. He has a master's, and I'm not sure exactly what his specific area of expertise is. It's all centered on theology, on the historicity of the Bible, on linguistics, but I don't know his exact pinpointed discipline. Very sharp kid. He's working on his PhD, so he's Wes Huff. He's not Dr. Wes Huff, not yet. But from what I understand, he's working on his PhD. So at some point, he will be entitled to those letters, PhD, piled higher and deeper. But the one thing that struck me is he's a Canadian kid. He's from Toronto, although from what I understand, he was actually born to missionary parents. This is from podcast interviews I've seen of him on Rogan, on this PBD podcast, and others. He was born actually in Pakistan, where his parents were Middle Eastern, or rather, were not Middle Eastern. His parents are missionaries. So he was born into Pakistan, spent some time in Jordan, and then laterally moved back to Toronto area. I don't know exactly where. I think he went to York, where I went for his undergraduate studies. I know I think he's at Tyndale now, which is part of the University of Toronto. That's kind of their seminary school, their School of Religious Studies. And very sharp kid. But the thing that strikes me is he's Canadian. And another Canadian, of course, who's gained a lot of fame is Dr. Jordan Peterson, famous clinical psychologist who kind of took the world by storm starting about 10 years ago when he refused to play along with the gender preferred pronoun game, where the University of Toronto was trying to compel speech on its professors, university staff, you have to use these made up words that were, and Peterson pushed back against it. And from that became something of a global sensation and went on to be a best-selling author with, he's got at least 3 best-selling books that I'm aware of. One is An Antidote to Chaos, 10 or 12 Rules for Life. And then a second follow-up book to that was 10 or 12 More Rules for Life. And then his most recent book is called We Who Wrestle with God. And it's amazing to me that we have Canadian voices that are becoming so prominent in what are largely called the culture wars, the war over Western culture. Are we going to continue to embrace this destructive ideology of materialism and postmodernism, or are we going to go back to our roots? Are we going to get back to Judeo-Christian values, or are we going to continue on this road away from them? And genuinely, I believe that we're going to continue on the road away. I think there's only going to be a remnant, to use a biblical word. There's only going to be a remnant of Western society that is going to continue to maintain their devotion, faith, religious belief in Judeo-Christian values. I think the train has left the station. I don't think there's any pulling it back at this point. I think we can have victories, but they're going to be victory. We're losing the war. We'll win some battles. But the thing that strikes me is Canadians, for the longest time, we were seen as hockey players, drawers of wood, hewers of wood and drawers of water. Canadians were not well regarded, in my view, in the broader perception in the Western world. We were seen as, I remember how they depicted Canadians on the old MASH television show. How's it going, eh? And call you when we need a hockey puck, that kind of thing. We were Americans' dumb cousins. And now we have Jordan Peterson, who's traveling all around the world, all around the English-speaking world. And now this kid, Wes Huff, suddenly blows up and is on Joe Rogan, is on this PBD podcast and countless others. And he's become something of a cultural phenomenon. He's getting his 15 minutes of fame. Will it go on from there? I think that kid has some staying power. But it reminded me of a passage in scripture from the Gospel of John, wherein, and I forget exactly how it plays out, but Jesus is calling his disciples to follow him, and the disciples go to another guy who eventually becomes a disciple, might be Philip. I'll use that name. I'm not sure if it's Philip, but they go up to him and they say, we found him who the scriptures speak of, the Christ, the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. And this Philip, or whatever his name is, says, Nazareth? Has anything good ever come out of Nazareth? And they say, come and see. I'll find it. It's right at the beginning of John. I'm pretty sure. And if I'm wrong, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Yeah, I found it. It's right in chapter 1. And if I go to chapter 1, verse 45, it says, Philip found Nathanael. That's who it is, Nathanael. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nathanael said to him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, come and see. The word of the Lord, thanks be to God. And I tend to think of that's what Canada's like. Canada. Can anything good come out of Canada? And here we have Jordan Peterson. Here we have this kid, Wes Huff, who are diving right into the culture wars, diving right into this battle between postmodernism, materialism, and good old traditional, the traditional Christian values that raised the Western world to the pinnacle, the height of civilization, best time ever to be alive. And yet everyone wants to tear it down now. I'm just seeing if there's anything being written in the chat, if I can get it to come up. There we go. I'm getting better. And Hank Holiday, I think that's stretching things, but yeah, I'm Canadian too, but I don't come anywhere close to those other two gentlemen, to Jordan Peterson or to Wes Huff. HM just wishes that in Canada that we could get an election, and we will between now and October, unless the world entire, I mean, everyone here should know my thesis statement that we're heading to a time where where the world are going to be facing global massive challenges, health scare, war, economic crisis. Goodness knows, I think we're going to get hit from at least 3, 4, 5 different directions, major crises, and that we could see the suspension of democracy in the Western world, and countries like Canada ceding their authority to some globalist body or some globalist individual and saying, these are global challenges and we need a global solution. So we have to put aside our petty nationalistic interests, and the globe, the humanity has to come together to confront these challenges. And then once we've overcome them, then we'll return to democratic norms. And of course, democracy never comes back. We're back to living in the days of the Roman Empire, where we're ruled by edict, where there is no absolute truth. And we're already in that world to a large degree. Danny has shown up and is wishing me a good evening with the praying hands and the cross. Thank you, my friend. Merci beaucoup. But I'm in a bit of a Lasonic mood because I almost feel like we're living in a world of slow torture. Just, let's have an open fight. Let's go out in the battlefield. Let's go. And it seems to be taking forever. I have Whale Oil Beef has probably caught up, and his comment, Whale Oil's comment, is democracy is when we have a free and independent media, and that has yet to occur. Yeah, the media, we have corporate media, and they push an agenda, and we all know this. But it strikes me that in Canada, I think the United States is ahead of the curve versus Canadians when it comes to recognizing that the corporate legacy media, and that includes the CBC, even though it's government owned in this country, Americans recognize more so than Canadians that the traditional media outlets are bought and paid for, and that they lie regularly. And I think that same mentality exists within Canada, but to a lesser degree. There are far more Canadians per capita, percentage-wise, than Americans who still trust what they see on their nightly newscasts. They still believe it. They look at the YouTube fact check that says the principal driver of climate change is the anthropogenic burning of fossil fuels. And that has been proven as a fact. And they say, okay, the same way it was proven as a fact that the SARS-CoV-2 virus came from a bat infecting a human in a wet market in China. And that was a fact. And so this world drives me bonkers, because we can't even decide on simple truths anymore. And even in Biden's speech, where his farewell address was saying that the amount of misinformation and disinformation that's being promulgated out there, most of the misinformation and disinformation that we have had to confront on important issues comes from government officials, our media, even health officials, They're the ones, the primary purveyors of misinformation and disinformation. And it's unsettling because we've raised science to religion. We tend to think if you stick the word science on something, that automatically means it is fact, because a scientist said it. And it's primarily politics in today's world, what drives everything. And so the political narrative is what drives the science. And so the ignorant mass is handed something as scientific fact, and all it is scientific opinion that lines up with the prevailing political ideology of the day. And why were we not allowed to know that the SARS-CoV-2 virus quite likely came from a lab in Wuhan, China? That's an interesting question. And it begs, to what degree have the Chinese infiltrated our very Canadian, American, Western worlds, the corridors of power? Many will remember the movie 300 about King Leonidas and the Spartans going up against Xerxes and his Persian Empire, and how there was a scene at the end where a member of the Spartan government is stabbed, and out of his pocket fall a bunch of gold coins, all with Xerxes' picture on them. He'd become an agent of the enemy. Likewise, when Leonidas at the beginning of the movie had to climb up where they had the oracle, where they had the religious, I don't know what you would call them, the seers, those who would give him the omens and tell him whether he could send a force up against Xerxes, and he had to climb up there, and they had been bought by the Persians. I wonder to what degree is the American deep state, the Canadian deep state, the deep states that exist within all Western democracies, how much are they owned and controlled by the Chinese? Open question. Open question. It just came out that Mark Carney, there are pictures of him and Ghislaine, or however you pronounce her name. I know the French pronunciation, Ghislaine Maxwell, the wife or girlfriend of Epstein. And Mark Carney is there. The two of them are in close, and Mark Carney has admitted that he was introduced to Maxwell by his sister-in-law, I believe it is. But he says that he never knew Jeffrey Epstein. Do you believe him? Frankly, I do not believe him. He's a politician now. He's entered the political fray, so he's a politician. And the one thing we know about politicians is they lie. And so here we have Mark Carney potentially attached to Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not making a claim. I'll give you my opinion. I think he's lying, but I can't prove it. And could he be owned by other individuals? In espionage circles, they call it a honeypot scheme. Do they have stuff on Mark Carney? The same way it was claimed that the Russians had, quote unquote, stuff on Donald Trump. Remember the allegations of the P tape. Is it possible that Mark Carney is owned? Is our government beholden to Chinese interests that are running counterproductive to the wants, needs, desires, and the best outcomes for Canadians? Are we operating to make things come out as good as possible for the Chinese, but not for Canadians? This world is heading to an inflection point. We're heading to a point of war. That's why I think Donald Trump wants the Panama Canal and Greenland and a closer union with Canada, however, whatever form that might take. is because the world, everyone's lining up their dance partners. What happened at in the years leading up to World War I, that is what happened. Countries started forming alliances, started to try and control key shipping lanes and things of that nature, because in military conflict, this becomes vitally important. The only difference is now, the modern world, where World War I was trench warfare and boots on the ground and bloody and horrific. World War II became more mechanized, heavy artillery. There was very little of trench warfare the way there had been in World War I. Now we're into the era of ballistic missiles, rockets, and drones, hypersonic ballistic missiles. And we're into the era of asymmetrical warfare. And we in the West, particularly Canada and the US, we've been so inoculated against any type of conflict. It's been so long. When's the last time there was a war on the North American continent? Last major one, I guess, would be 1860, the US Civil War. And Canada, we haven't had anything of not since the War of 1812. So it's not in our memory. It's not even in our DNA to think about, could we wake up one morning to rockets and drones and missiles hitting our major cities? How would we react? How would we deal with it psychologically? Could we handle it psychologically? Or would there be, what would people do? It's an interesting question. I don't know, and I hope I never find out. So, sorry for the... I'm just going to read what's being written. I'm just catching up on the messages, and there were a bunch of them. Oh man, there are so many. Okay. Whale oil, right? Okay, read that already. Some greetings. Danny saying we are living in the upside down. Absolutely. We live in a world where lies are declared truth and truth are declared lies. We know that. Danny's also writing, defund the CBC. We don't need it anymore. We don't need to have taxpayers funding an agency which basically lies and promulgates propaganda. You can get propaganda for free. We don't have to pay for it with our tax dollars. Danny Whale Oil wants to know if Danny is in Aussie land. No, Danny is in Montreal, Quebec, as he says, Quebec, even with the accent aigu. But Whale Oil knew Danny was from there. I thought it was upside down, down under. Whale Oil writes, empirical physical science is different from science doctrine. Good point. We have this, science has become a religious enterprise, sadly. Danny echoing what the upside down world, truth is lies, lies are truth, good is evil, evil is good. Whale prefers the term inversion to upside down, both work. Danny's saying we are Chinese owned. I don't think we are, but I do think our government is. Our government is certainly. That's I can't prove it. I can't definitively prove it, but what, the whole point of espionage is to do things behind the curtain. Whale is asking if Epstein Island is also called Lolita Island. I believe so. This is, all the allegations against Prince Andrew, Randy Andy. And Danny writes that the liberals are WEF and Chinese owned. Yep. I think what we're seeing is a teardown of the old world system. And it's a question, I think there is going to be a battle between different factions who want to take control of the wheel. Will it be the WEF types, the Soros, the Musk types, or will it be the Chinese or the Islamic world? They want to control. They would like to introduce a global caliphate and have everyone living under fundamentalist Islamic law like Sharia. That's what they would want. And when you tear something down, it's in a fashion, it's similar to what happened when the British vacated their old mandate. They left a vacuum. There's no one in charge anymore. And so what happened was the Jewish Palestinians living in the land who wanted to establish a nation for themselves had to fight against the invading armies of 5 colonial powers trying to come in and take over because it was a vacuum. And what's happening now is the power structures that have been running the world now are tearing it down, and they think they're going to be the ones to build it back. But there are wolves waiting on the hinterland looking and saying, okay, once it gets teared down, it's a free-for-all. Who's going to win? Who's going to suffer a humiliating Nakba defeat, and who's going to rise up? Will it be the Chinese? Will it be the fascist corporate sector? Will they be able to do what they want to do, where we own nothing and we're supposedly happy? Or will it be the Islamic world reasserting itself? And remember, the old Ottoman Empire, at one time, it stretched all the way to the Iberian Peninsula, into Spain and Portugal. It took large chunks of Europe, and Americans were being taken hostage, were being enslaved by, the Islamic world. That was one of the impetuses that led Americans to abolish slavery, was the fact that Americans were being enslaved. Their ships were being captured off the Barbary Coast, and they were being enslaved, and their women were being forced into harems. And, well, maybe slavery isn't such a good idea. It's all depends whether you're the slave owner or the slave. And HM is writing that globalist Carney is the WEF choice for Canada. Absolutely. And Whale Oil is saying that Carney is being rather Obama-like in his public delivery. I noticed he was on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart and performed very well. Very well, not stiff, very comfortable, very friendly, very sharp, quick on his feet. He's a good-looking guy. He's got the bona fides or the bona fides, depending on how you want to say it, Harvard educated, and I don't know where else, Harvard, Yale, Harvard, Cambridge. He's been to the top-notch schools, former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, top advisor to the WEF. He's big on climate change. We have to fight climate change. This is the most existential threat facing humanity. Bull roar, but there are a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans, a lot of people all around the world who have bought into the climate change narrative, who believe this crap. And, it's like the COVID era. What are you supposed to do when you recognize that following stickers down a floor is stupid, but if you don't do it, you're going to have some woman wanting to slam you with her purse and call the police on you for not following the stickers? And do you want to have that confrontation? Danny's writing, don't delude yourselves. The liberals without Trudeau are still liberals. Very good, and they are. Hank Holiday is writing that everyone should understand by now, and especially over the last 4 years, that it's comms, I think you're meaning to write communists versus free men. It's totalitarianism versus liberty. And which side do you want to be on? Benjamin Franklin's famous quote, if you give up your liberty for security, you're going to have neither. our security rests in our liberty. But when people are afraid, and we saw that in spades in the COVID era, people were willing to give up everything because they were scared to death. They had been propagandized to death over the deadly coronavirus. If you caught this bug, that you were going to be in an ICU getting put into an induced coma and hooked up to a ventilator with very little chance of survival. That you couldn't convince them otherwise, because it had happened so many times. Some 88-year-old with cardiovascular disease who can't get dressed or go to the bathroom by himself and needs someone to bathe him. He got it and it happened to him, so it could happen to you too. Whale Oil is writing, 4 years, Whale Oil thinks it goes back a lot further. I think we all agree. It's just a matter of degree. It's been ramping up. Danny's writing, Trudeau needs Trudeau needs us unarmed and defenseless. But what is the end goal? Look at all the other countries that were disarmed. And Danny's calling it democide, like democraticide. Danny, climate hoax. HM writes that Mark Carney reminds Heather of Michael Ignatieff, who was the leader of the Liberal Party before Trudeau. And he led the Liberals to the worst defeat they've ever had in an election. They were reduced to third party status behind the NDP. And Ignatieff was branded by the Conservatives very well. They branded just visiting, because he had been a professor at Harvard University and only moved back to Canada to win the leadership of the party. So they said, oh, he's just visiting. And that might be calling him carbon tax Carney. That's decent, but I think put that just visiting label on him as well. He fled Canada to go and become governor of the Bank of England. And then he left there to become a top advisor at the UN and to push this climate change crap. Let me read on. Danny says, blood must be shed from time to time to water the freedom tree. There's sacrifice needed. And that's something that doesn't, we want our cake and we want to eat it too. I want to live consequence free. I want to live like nothing even matters. It was an old song by Great Big Sea, band out of Newfoundland. Whale Oil is writing, the EUA was the totalitarian tool of the time. Not sure EUA, European Union. And then Danny's writing, democide, death by government. There's a good one. CBDC, Carney, central bank digital currency. And Whale Oil is writing that freedom is not free, but we want it to be free. We're living on the legacy of our ancestors. And do we have the same fortitude that they had to fight against the powers that would want to bring back the old world system? We have been on a progression, but I would say sometime in and around 1960, we kind of peaked, and we've been going up and down and up and down and up and down, and now probably since the 90s, 2000s, we started on a decline. So in 50s, 1960, we hit a plateau. We've had little peaks and valleys over the ensuing 50, 60 years. Well, rise, fall. And then around 1990s, 2000, we've been in a steady decline. And that decline is going to accelerate. And ultimately, and this is where I've been consuming a lot of content like this kid Westhoff, like Jordan Peterson, the culture wars, and rehabilitating the gospel good news of Jesus Christ and the wisdom that is so intrinsic in the Bible. I just saw content put out by Peterson. I don't know how long ago he put it out, but I just watched it, where he was talking about you decide you want to be well read. I want to be well read. And I want to get to the base. Like, who should I read? What authors should I read to understand? And a good one would be William Shakespeare, because so much of what Shakespeare read was, there were echoes of it in later literary works. So people would read Shakespeare, and then you got, West Side Story. West Side Story is a Broadway musical, won many Tony Awards, and then became an Oscar award-winning film with Troy Donahue, Natalie Wood, Rita Moreno. And, West Side Story is Romeo and Juliet, just modernized. So, okay, Shakespeare is a good thing to read, because it'll help you with so much of the literature that came after, because so many of the writers after Shakespeare relied on Shakespeare. But what did Shakespeare rely on? Well, you might say, well, Shakespeare relied on writers like Chaucer. Oh, so maybe read Chaucer and read things like Canterbury Tales. But then what did Chaucer read? And when you get right down to the root of it, the base is this collection, this library of books. This is where where everything in the Western literary library, this is the root of the tree. Everything else is just, this is from whence the tree grew, and then we got the branches and the leaves. So if you want to get to the root, this is why I'm going through it again. I think I'm coming up to the end of 2nd Chronicles. And to throw out my tired joke, if you want to know where the book of 2nd Chronicles is, it's right before the book of 1st Chronicles. Ha, ha, ha. Bad jokes. It represents, I'm at about the halfway point in terms of content of the Old Testament. I'm about halfway through, having read the full New Testament for, this go through. Anyway, let me see if there's any more. Danny's saying freedom, once they take it away, they rarely give it back. It must be fought for. I would say they never give it back. It has to be fought for. It's the only way we get our freedom. And sometimes, and it's a bloody victory. Bloody victory to achieve. There's a lot of sacrifice required. If we look at the early church was built on the blood of the saints, of the martyrs. So how many tens of thousands of Christians went to their deaths to ensure the rights that we have now? And, that was the start of it. And it built and built and built. Danny saying Chaucer is another good one, huh? Whale Oil, are you practicing your new Trump comedy routine? Oh, Whale Oil is asking if I'm practicing my new Trump for a new Trump comedy routine upcoming. I should go out and get myself a MAGA hat that has blonde hair coming out. And Danny's writing, friends, Canadians, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to Barry Trudeau, not to praise him. Ha 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 ha. Shakespeare. King Richard, is that the one? King Richard III? Friends, Romans, countrymen. Or was that Caesar? I forget. Anyway, I'll leave it off for now. I've gone on over an hour. Kind of a rambly one, if ever there was a rambly video by me. Thank you for the thumbs. Thank you for filling the chat. And we'll see what comes of the Israel-Hamas situation, about what comes with the liberal leadership. March 9th, not far away. We'll see what happens Monday. Monday, we're 3 days away, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then bang, we've got Donald Trump being inaugurated, which, like 4 years ago, people thought it was the end of the world. Canada was supposed to have all kinds of Americans moving up here because they were terrified at the thought of what a Trump presidency was going to mean. I'm going to go to Numbers and read the blessing the way it's written. Haven't yet got it. All I got to do is take a little time and cement it. But the Lord bless and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. That is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. That's the word that Aaron spoke over God's covenant chosen people. And man, oh man, oh man, oh man, we need it now more than ever in a world that's unraveling. We need to get our feet onto the solid foundation that is God's holy revealed word. Embrace it. It's the only thing that's the storms are coming. Anyway, last something we got written. And Binary got here just in time for the blessing. Hey, blessings are good. But Danny's writing Ephesians 6:12 is that we do not fight battles of flesh and blood. This is spiritual warfare in the heavenly realms. We are living in times, interesting times. And Danny says, yep, that's got to be his favorite passage. Mine's no, I can't remember the numbers. Luke. I can't remember my life passage. I can't remember the scriptural passage, the chapter and verse. You know, all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. Can't remember the chapter and verse. And HM, John 3:16, for God so loved the world. All right, and he did. He loves you. He loves me. He loves us all. He wants a relationship with us. We just have to humble ourselves. We just have to subject ourselves. And glory awaits. So I'll leave it there. Have a good night, everyone. Maybe tomorrow. Won't be too long. Talk to you soon.